The battle began in the shadow of Harkon Prime, a gas giant ringed with asteroids that glittered like cosmic shrapnel. For centuries, the Zorathian Empire had expanded unchecked, its fleets carving a path of domination across the stars. Resistance was futile. Every species they encountered either submitted or was obliterated. The Zorathians were the masters of the galaxy, their war machines unmatched and their strategy unyielding. Until they met humanity. The warning had been dismissed. A fringe world governor had sent an urgent missive about a hostile species emerging from a backwater arm of the galaxy. The High Command, gathered in the shimmering halls of the Imperial Nexus, laughed at the idea. Humanity? A death-world species barely out of their cradle? They were insignificant, little more than insects compared to the might of the Empire. Fleet Master Ulzhak, the commander of the 7th Imperial Armada, had been assigned to deal with the nuisance. It was a punishment assignment for the once promising officer who had fallen out of favor. Leading a fleet of 200 capital ships and tens of thousands of smaller vessels, Ulzhak believed it would be a quick and decisive victory. A display of overwhelming power followed by the usual terms of surrender. What Ulzhak didn't know, what none of the Empire could fathom, was that humanity wasn't like the others. The first encounter. The Zorathian fleet dropped out of hyperspace above the contested system. Their arrival was as grandiose as ever, hundreds of warships emerging in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the Empire's emblem. The system's star bathed the fleet in golden light, a beacon of their unchallenged supremacy. Ulzhak sat on the command bridge of the flagship Vekrith, his elongated, insectoid body coiled with anticipation. His compound eyes scanned the holographic display of the system. There it was, the human fleet. A motley collection of ships, smaller and fewer in number than even a single Zorathian battle group. They were primitive by Zorathian standards, a patchwork of angular designs and strange, clunky weaponry. The humans hadn't even bothered to arrange their ships in a proper formation. They drifted in loose clusters, their engines pulsing erratically. They don't even know how to deploy a proper fleet, Ulzhak sneered. The bridge officers chittered in agreement. Fleet Master, an officer reported, their voice clicking in the Zorathian tongue. We're detecting unusual energy signatures from their vessels. Primitive reactors but highly overclocked. Their systems must be unstable. Typical Deathworlders, Ulzhak replied. Reckless and desperate. They're probably using their own ships as makeshift bombs. Shall we commence the assault? Another officer asked. Ulzhak raised a clawed hand. Not yet. Let's see if they try to parley first. It's always amusing to watch them beg. The human message. Minutes later, a communication request came through. The humans were hailing them. Ulzhak leaned back in his command throne, his mandibles clicking in amusement. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing a human officer. She was clad in an armored uniform, her face scarred but resolute. Her gaze was cold, calculating, and entirely devoid of the fear Ulzhak had expected. For a moment he was taken aback. Then he regained his composure. This is Fleet Master Ulzhak of the Zorathian Empire. You face the 7th Imperial Armada. Your resistance is futile. Surrender now, and your species may yet serve the Empire. The human smiled, but it wasn't a gesture of submission. It was the kind of smile that sent a chill through Ulzhak's exoskeleton. It spoke of confidence, even amusement. This is Captain Elena Hayes of the UHN Resolute. You've entered human territory uninvited. I suggest you leave while you still can. Ulzhak's mandibles twitched in irritation. You dare to threaten the Zorathian Empire? Do you know who you are speaking to? Yes, Hayes said, her voice calm. A soon-to-be footnote in human history. Before Ulzhak could respond, the transmission cut off. The bridge fell silent, the Zorathian officers exchanging uneasy glances. No one had ever spoken to the Empire with such defiance. Arrogant fools, Ulzhak hissed. Prepare the fleet. We'll show them the cost of their insolence. The trap is sprung. The Zorathian fleet advanced, their ships forming an impenetrable wall of firepower. They unleashed a volley of plasma beams and kinetic rounds, enough firepower to obliterate a small moon. The human ships scrambled, their movements erratic and seemingly uncoordinated. They're already breaking, one officer remarked, watching as several human vessels appeared to flee deeper into the system. Chase them down, Ulzhak commanded. We'll crush their spirit entirely. The Zorathians pursued, their smaller vessels racing ahead to pick off the stragglers. It was only when the first wave reached the asteroid belt that they realized something was wrong. Fleet Master, an officer cried. The asteroids, There are human installations hidden within them. Before Ulzhak could respond, the asteroid belt erupted with fire. Hidden artillery platforms and missile silos unleashed a torrent of destruction, tearing through the Zorathian vanguard. Ships exploded in blinding flashes, their hulls shredded by high-velocity projectiles and energy beams. "Retreat the forward units," Ulzhak barked. But the humans weren't finished. From behind the asteroids emerged a second wave of ships, smaller and faster than the first. They darted through the chaos, targeting the vulnerable underbellies of the Zorathian vessels. Their weapons were unconventional, bypassing shields with EMP bursts and concentrated railgun fire. "They're dismantling our fleet," an officer shouted, panic creeping into their voice. Ulzhak slammed his clawed hand onto the console. "Regroup. Regroup now. They can't possibly match us in open combat." It was then that the human flagship, the Resolute, emerged from hyperspace directly behind the Vekrith. Its angular hull glinted menacingly as it unleashed a concentrated barrage on the Zorathian flagship. Alarms blared, the Vekrith shuddering under the impact. "Impossible?" Ulzhak roared. "How did they?" "They anticipated our movements," Chang interrupted, her voice trembling. They're outthinking us." For the first time in his career, Ulzhak felt the icy grip of fear. Humanity wasn't just surviving, they were winning. The Zorathian fleet, so confident and unyielding, was beginning to crumble. And this was only the beginning of humanity's retaliation. The bridge of the Vekrith was a cacophony of alarms and panicked voices. Fleetmaster Ulzhak stared at the tactical display, his mandibles grinding as the impossible unfolded before him. The humans weren't retreating, they were systematically dismantling his fleet. The asteroid ambush had crippled his vanguard, and now his once imposing formation was in disarray. "Fleetmaster," an officer called out, their voice trembling. "We've lost 37 ships in the last 3 minutes. Their small craft are overwhelming our defenses." Ulzhak slammed a clawed fist onto his command console, silencing the chatter. "They're just Death World primitives," he bellowed. "Focus fire on their flagship. Crush their morale." The order was relayed, and the Zorathian fleet turned its weapons on the Resolute, humanity's lead warship. A barrage of plasma beams and kinetic slugs lit up the void, streaking toward the human vessel. But instead of retreating, the Resolute surged forward, its engines burning bright. Captain Elena Hayes stood on the bridge of her ship, her expression calm but focused. "Hold steady," she ordered, her voice cutting through the tension. "Let them think we're desperate." The Resolute weaved through the storm of enemy fire, its reinforced armor absorbing glancing blows while its advanced shielding system deflected more direct hits. Hayes's crew worked with precision, their movements synchronized as if they were all part of a single organism. "Targets locked," her weapons officer reported. "Fire at will," Hayes said. The Resolute unleashed its own volley, a series of railgun slugs and high-yield torpedoes designed to punch through Zorathian shields and hulls alike. The weapons tore through the enemy ranks, sending explosions rippling across the void. 2 Zorathian battlecruisers disintegrated under the onslaught, their debris scattering like shrapnel. The unpredictable tactics of humanity. The Zorathians were masters of overwhelming firepower and rigid, hierarchical strategy. Their fleets operated with precision, every move calculated and rehearsed. But humanity played by a different set of rules. The smaller human ships darted through the chaos like predatory fish, exploiting weaknesses in the Zorathian formation. They struck hard and fast, disappearing before the Zorathians could retaliate. The asteroid ambush had been just the beginning. Now humanity's fleet was employing hit-and-run tactics that the Zorathians couldn't counter. Ulzhak's compound eyes darted across the tactical display, searching for a pattern in the human attacks. But there was no pattern, at least, none that his mind could discern. "Fleetmaster, their movements are chaotic," an officer stammered. "We can't predict their next move." "Then stop trying to predict them and crush them," Ulzhak snapped. "Deploy the assault drones. Overwhelm them with numbers." Thousands of Zorathian assault drones spilled from the fleet's carriers, their sleek forms swarming toward the human ships. But even this move, which had crushed countless species before, failed against the humans. Hayes watched the drones approach, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "They think numbers will save them," she muttered. "Let's show them what precision looks like." On her command, the human fleet deployed a countermeasure, small, automated gunships equipped with advanced targeting systems. The gunships moved in coordinated packs, carving through the Zorathian drones with ruthless efficiency. "They're cutting through the drones like they're nothing," a Zorathian officer cried. Ulzhak's claws trembled with rage. Impossible. No species has ever. Fleet Master, another officer interrupted. We've detected a second wave of human ships emerging from hyperspace. They're flanking us. Ulzhak turned to the tactical display, his compound eyes widening. Humanity had somehow coordinated a secondary fleet to strike from behind, pinning the Zorathians between two fronts. The desperate retreat. The second wave hit hard, targeting the Zorathian fleet support ships, carriers, repair vessels and supply lines. Without their logistical backbone, the Zorathian fleet began to falter. The Resolute led the charge, its railguns hammering the Zorathian flagship's shields. The Vekrith shuddered under the assault, its systems straining to keep up. Fleet Master, our shield generators are failing, an officer reported. Divert all power to the engines. Ulzhak ordered. We must regroup. But there was no time. The human fleet pressed its advantage, their ships coordinating with a precision that seemed almost uncanny. Every Zorathian attempt to regroup was met with another devastating strike. On the bridge of the Resolute, Hayes watched as the Zorathians began to break formation. They're faltering, she said, her tone calm but resolute. Press the attack. Don't let them recover. The human fleet pushed forward, their ships relentless. The Zorathians, so used to being the aggressors, found themselves in a position they had never experienced. Total vulnerability. Ulzhak's pride and arrogance had been shattered. For the first time in his career, he gave the order he had once considered unthinkable. Retreat, he growled. All ships retreat. The Zorathian fleet began to pull back, their once imposing armada reduced to a battered and broken shadow of its former self. The humans didn't pursue, allowing the Zorathians to limp away into hyperspace. A message to the Empire. As the Zorathians retreated, Hayes turned to her communications officer. Send a message to the Zorathian Empire, she said. Let them know what happened here. The message was short but clear. This was humanity's first clash with your empire. Let it be the last. If you return, you won't find mercy. The crew of the Resolute erupted into cheers as the Zorathian fleet vanished. Humanity had faced the might of the galaxy's most fearsome empire, and they had won. But Hayes knew this was only the beginning. The Zorathians would return, and when they did, humanity would be ready. The Zorathian retreat was temporary, a momentary regrouping to lick their wounds and recalibrate their strategy. Fleet Master Ulzhak's failure sent shockwaves through the Imperial Nexus. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's infallible reputation had been tarnished. The news spread like wildfire across the Zorathian territories, emboldening whispers of rebellion among subjugated species. But the Empire wasn't about to let its dominance be questioned. Humanity's victory was viewed not as a fluke but as an affront, an insult that required swift and overwhelming retribution. A second fleet, double the size of Ulzhak's armada, was assembled, led by one of the Empire's most ruthless strategists, Warlord Zorvath. Where Ulzhak had relied on brute force, Zorvath was a master of psychological warfare and deception. The humans believed themselves clever, Zorvath declared before the Imperial High Council. They will learn the cost of their arrogance. Their entire species will serve as an example to all others. The High Council, a circle of insectoid beings adorned in regal bioarmor, chittered in approval. Zorvath's confidence was unshakable. Humanity would be crushed, and the Empire's reputation would be restored. Humanity prepares. Back on Earth and its colonies, humanity was far from complacent. The victory at Harkon Prime had bought them time, but no one believed the Zorathians were finished. Earth's leaders, once divided and prone to bureaucratic gridlock, found themselves united under a single banner: survival. The United Human Nations (UHN) ramped up production of warships, weapons, and defense systems. Factories operated around the clock, churning out fleets of sleek, heavily armed vessels. Scientists and engineers worked tirelessly to refine humanity's technology, incorporating lessons learned from the first encounter. Captain Elena Hayes, now a celebrated hero, was given command of the UHN's newly formed First Fleet. Her flagship, the Resolute, had been upgraded with cutting-edge systems, including an experimental energy weapon known as the Sunstorm Array. It was a weapon of last resort, capable of devastating an entire sector, but it came at a cost. Hayes stood on the observation deck of Earth's orbital shipyard, watching as the First Fleet assembled. Hundreds of ships floated in formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the distant sun. She couldn't help but feel a mix of pride and apprehension. "Do you think we're ready?" Commander Raj Patel, her second-in-command, asked. "We don't have a choice," Hayes replied. The Zarathians are coming and they won't underestimate us this time. The battle for Sol. The Zarathian fleet arrived in the Sol system with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Hundreds of warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their massive engines roaring as they advanced toward Earth. At their center was Zorvatha's flagship, the Obsidian Claw, a colossal vessel bristling with weaponry and shield generators. Humanity's response was immediate. The First Fleet moved to intercept, positioning itself between the Zarathians and Earth. Hayes stood on the bridge of the Resolute, her jaw set and her eyes locked on the tactical display. Enemy fleet detected, reported the sensor officer. They've deployed forward scouts. Looks like they're testing our defenses. Let them test, Hayes said. We'll give them results they won't forget. The initial skirmish was brutal. The Zarathians sent waves of drone fighters and smaller frigates to probe humanity's defenses. The humans responded with surgical precision, their ships working in coordinated groups to pick off the attackers. Missiles and railgun slugs streaked across the void, lighting up the darkness with fiery explosions. But Zorvath was no Allshack. He analyzed humanity's tactics, probing for weaknesses and adapting his strategy in real time. Humanity has grown clever, Zorvath mused, watching the battle unfold from his command throne. But they are still inexperienced. We'll wear them down. He ordered his fleet to focus on the human carriers, crippling their ability to deploy reinforcements. The Zarathians targeted the Resolute specifically, hoping to decapitate humanity's leadership. The Resolute shuddered under the assault, its shields flaring as it absorbed hit after hit. On the bridge, Hayes barked orders, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Divert power to the forward shields, she commanded. Keep us in the fight. We've lost 2 carriers, Patel reported. Their firepower is overwhelming. Hayes clenched her fists. The Zarathians were pressing their advantage and humanity's fleet was beginning to falter. But she wasn't ready to give up. Turning the tide. As the battle raged, Hayes activated a hidden contingency plan. Humanity's engineers had developed a network of stealth drones, each equipped with high-yield explosives and cloaking devices. The drones had been positioned in key locations throughout the battlefield, waiting for the right moment. Deploy the Shadowhawks, Hayes ordered. The drones activated, slipping past the Zarathian sensors undetected. They targeted the enemy's carriers and support ships, crippling their ability to sustain the fight. One by one, Zarathian vessels erupted in flames, their massive forms breaking apart under the onslaught. Zorvatha's mandibles twitched in frustration. Where did those come from? He demanded. Find their source and eliminate it. But it was too late. The Zarathian fleet, now vulnerable and exposed, began to crumble. Hayes seized the opportunity, ordering the First Fleet to press the attack. Human ships surged forward, their weapons tearing through the remaining Zarathian vessels. The Resolute targeted the Obsidian Claw, its Sunstorm array charging for a final devastating strike. On Zorvatha's bridge, alarms blared as his ship's shields began to fail. Warlord, we must retreat, one of his officers pleaded. Zorvatha's pride warred with his survival instincts. For a moment he considered staying and fighting to the bitter end. But he knew the truth, humanity had bested them. Order the retreat, he growled. The Zarathian fleet began to pull back, their once mighty armada reduced to scattered survivors. Humanity had won again, but at great cost. Dozens of human ships had been destroyed and thousands of lives had been lost. As the last Zarathian ship vanished into hyperspace, Hayes collapsed into her chair, exhaustion washing over her. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The battered remnants of the Zarathian fleet vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a graveyard of shattered vessels and debris drifting in the silence of space. For a moment, there was no sound on the Resolute's bridge, save for the hum of its systems and the faint crackle of damaged communications. Then, as the realization set in, a cheer erupted among the crew, a sound of relief and triumph. Captain Elena Hayes didn't join in. She sat in her command chair, eyes fixed on the tactical display, watching the enemy markers disappear one by one. Her body ached and her mind was clouded with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. Victory always came with a price, and today's cost had been steep. Counting the losses. Status report, Hayes said, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. Commander Raj Patel glanced at the casualty report streaming across his console, his expression grim. We've lost 41 ships including the Atlas and Endeavour. Estimated crew casualties, over 20,000. Civilian stations in Jupiter's orbit sustained heavy damage during the initial bombardment. The orbital colony lost atmospheric integrity. Rescue teams are en route, but the death toll is already in the thousands. Hayes closed her eyes briefly, the weight of those numbers settling heavily on her shoulders. Every name on that casualty list was a life lost, a family broken. Yet despite the tragedy, humanity still stood. And the enemy? She asked. Patel's expression darkened. We've confirmed the destruction of 68 Zorathian ships, including 6 of their capital vessels. Their flagship, Obsidian Claw, sustained heavy damage but managed to escape into hyperspace. Warlord Zorvith is still alive. A bitter taste filled Hayes' mouth. She had hoped to end the conflict decisively, to send a message to the Zorathian Empire that humanity would not be trifled with. But Zorvith's survival meant the Empire would regroup, and the war would continue. A message to the galaxy. In the aftermath of the battle, the Resolute's comms officer intercepted transmissions from neutral systems and allied colonies. The galaxy had been watching, holding its collective breath as the underdog Deathworlders faced off against the galaxy's most feared empire. Now the silence had been broken and the whispers began. They said humanity couldn't survive a second assault, one transmission read. They were wrong. Against all odds they've done it again, said another. Perhaps the Zorathians aren't as invincible as they claim. The battle's outcome wasn't just a victory for Earth, it was a shift in the galaxy's power dynamic. For centuries, the Zorathian Empire had ruled with an iron grip, crushing all opposition with ruthless efficiency. Now humanity had proven that even the mightiest empire could bleed. Hayes leaned over the comms console. Broadcast a message to the galaxy, she ordered. Let everyone know what happened here. The message was simple and clear. Humanity has defended its home once again. We do not seek war, but we will not cower in the face of aggression. To those who stand with us, you have our gratitude. To those who threaten us, you have been warned. The Empire's reckoning. Far from Earth, in the gilded halls of the Zorathian Imperial Nexus, Warlord Zorvith knelt before the High Council. His once imposing frame was hunched, his bioarmor scorched and battered from the battle. He spoke of humanity's tenacity, their unorthodox tactics, and their willingness to fight to the last breath. The council was not pleased. They are a primitive species, one counselor hissed. And yet they have humiliated us twice. This cannot stand. Zorvith raised his head, his compound eyes reflecting a mixture of defiance and shame. They are no mere primitives. They are Deathworlders, survivors born of chaos and violence. We underestimated them once and we paid the price. If we do not tread carefully, they may become a threat greater than any we have faced. The council was divided. Some called for an immediate all-out invasion to crush humanity once and for all. Others urged caution, fearing that further defeats would embolden the Empire's enemies and inspire rebellion among its subjugated worlds. In the end, the Council's decision was pragmatic. They would withdraw their forces from the Sol system and focus on consolidating their power elsewhere. But the humans would not be forgotten. Plans were set in motion. Spies, saboteurs, and agents of subterfuge would infiltrate human society, sowing discord and undermining their unity. A new dawn. Back on Earth, the UHN convened in the ruins of what had once been Geneva. Representatives from every human colony gathered to discuss the future. The battles against the Zorathians had revealed humanity's vulnerabilities, but they had also shown its strengths: unity, resilience, and ingenuity. We cannot wait for the Zorathians to strike again, Hayes said, addressing the assembly. We must take the fight to them, not through reckless aggression, but by becoming a force they cannot ignore or overwhelm. We must show the galaxy that humanity is here to stay. Her words were met with unanimous agreement. Humanity's military would be rebuilt and expanded. Alliances would be forged with other species who had suffered under the Empire's rule. Research into advanced technologies would accelerate, ensuring that humanity remained one step ahead of its enemies. As the meeting adjourned, Hayes stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The scars of the battle were still visible, craters where buildings had once stood, smoke rising from distant fires, but so were the signs of hope. People worked tirelessly to rebuild, their determination unshaken. Commander Patel joined her, his expression contemplative. Do you think we'll ever see peace? Hayes smiled faintly, the weight of command momentarily lifting. Maybe not in our lifetime. But if we keep fighting, maybe the next generation will. Above them, the stars glittered, a reminder of the vast, untamed frontier that awaited humanity. They had survived the Empire's wrath, but their journey was far from over. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was ready to write its next chapter.